Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to our annual series of interviews of candidates for local offices. The town election is May 24th. We have contests for Select Board, Finance Committee, Planning Board, and School Committee. I am interviewing all these candidates. I have prepared questions specific to each board or committee. Each candidate will respond to the same questions for that office. This allows voters the chance to compare the candidates' approaches and thinking according to the issue. These videos will run a maximum of 25 minutes and will be available on HCAT's website, on HCAT's YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. So let's get started. Okay, so let me introduce you to Vincent Murphy, who is on the Finance Committee now. Vin, when did you get elected?
I got elected 6 years ago.
6 years ago, so you're going in for the third term.
I am.
All right, so we're going to ask you the same questions we've asked your colleagues and counterparts. So just describe yourself briefly.
Basically, I've been a resident of Holliston since 1998. My wife, Julie, grew up here, so I think I have some sort of Hollistonian thing because of her, and most of my kids went to school here at Holliston Public. So, been a wonderful place. From a background standpoint, I am a vice president of finance for a small nonprofit, which is based out of Quincy, and we also have a location in Danbury and DC. So.
Okay, I want a fun fact.
Fun fact, I have a identical twin brother who did a DNA test, and we found our biological mother. We're both adopted, and she lives literally the town next to where my brother lives. So a small world as it goes.
That is so amazing.
Yep.
Well, we'll definitely have to find more about that, but it can't be on your 20 minutes.
Okay.
So, why did you choose for this particular board and not some other committee?
I'm a numbers person.
You're a numbers person. So far, that's sort of the standard answer.
Okay, well, I am. I'm a CPA.
Yeah.
So I've been working pretty much accountant, vice president of finance, controller for various nonprofit organizations, and through that I've done budgets. So I felt I'm more inclined to do that rather than be on the school committee or a lot of the other ones. The other ones were interesting, but
sure.
I felt as though this was where my skill set fits best.
So let's talk about your skill set.
Yep.
What are the skills specifically? Yeah, you like numbers.
I do. I mean, the fact that I am a CPA, having the acuity of doing budgets pretty much my whole life, with all working life that is, and going through looking at numbers and looking at details and said, okay, well, what does this mean? What's this trend? And asking questions. So I think that takes a different mindset versus somebody who's into art and things like that. I don't have that tendency, so don't ask me to describe what a picture is, but I do have a tendency to look at data, numbers, and drill into it. And I think that's something that's needed in a role like this. So you're looking at numbers every week, people bringing up different budgets, and so you're asking questions, what does this mean? What's changing? So you see things maybe other people wouldn't see, and asking questions. And my background of going through and developing budgets, I might ask questions that are different from somebody like who's a technical person. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, all right. So what are the biggest funding issues, and I'm limiting you to two, I limited everybody else, facing the town and you guys on the Finance Committee, and gals, I shouldn't put it that way, in your view, and what would you propose to address?
Upcoming in the next 3 years is your question?
In the next 3 years.
The biggest one, I think, is we're going to have to do something with our DPW water department building. They're very old, and I've seen pictures, and they look very dilapidated. So we've done many studies in town, and right now we're just figuring out where it should go. And now, then, after we figure out where it should go and what it should be, the question is, how are we going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it through money we've socked away under capital, or are we going to pay for it for debt override, or we're going to pay for it for debt but not with an override? So these are the questions we're going to have to ask ourselves as a town, because the town will eventually vote if it's a debt or even moving money from capital. So maybe it's a combination of the two or the three, and say, okay.
So if the DPW, replace the DPW is one issue.
Yep.
What's the second issue?
I would say right now, the various things that have been put into place with ARPA funds, the funding from the feds that were received, and for example, all-day kindergarten. How is that going to be funded in the next couple of years? Because we paid for it and we have a plan for the next couple of years, but what happens after that? Where is that cliff and who's going to fund it and how is that going to be funded? It's going to come from somewhere. It's going to come from taxes. So if we want to keep all-day kindergarten, which I'm sure people do, or is that another place where we can do a Prop 2.5 override, which I know this town is not
That's
favorite.
an operating override.
It would be, yes. So
Yeah,
permanently
so that's the
override.
kind that permanently changes the picture.
So not,
Yeah.
all
And-
these different options we have to be aware of, but that's one thing.
Yeah.
So in all the different additional staff, do we have enough resources in town? Are in growth keeping up and able to afford all these different things? And the looming thing over the horizon is, are we going to have a recession? So that's what's being bandied about with the Federal Reserve tightening interest rates. How does that impact the town? I think we're in better shape because we're residential than, let's say, a Natick or other places, but it still will impact us. So
No, we won't get away scot-free, that's for sure. What if we didn't, and this is an extra question, but what if we didn't fix the DPW?
I think we could put it off more, but I think where it is right now, it's a hazard. I mean, I've seen the pictures, and it's a hazard for the employees who are working there, and it also sends a message, in my opinion, to those employees, well, we think less of you, because they're working in a building that's over, both of them, I mean, both
Buildings.
sites are very old, I think over 50 years, and some are piecemealed together because you have people who are very talented and tradesmen, and they're putting things that probably wouldn't pass if an inspector went through there right now. So, and how long can you keep doing that? I think you have to draw the line and said, we've been holding off. It's not a sexy thing. It's not like a brand new school where, yeah, we can point to, nobody's going to come to town because your DPW place is great. But having a consolidated place between the DPW, which includes the highway department, the water department, and now the soon-to-be, hopefully passed, the Parks and Rec field department. So those will all be consolidated in one location. It will make more efficiency from the management standpoint, but also the building be better than what it is now. So.
Okay. All right. So we all know that the town never has enough money, no matter what.
Yep.
So when you're faced, when you are faced with a choice between two very compelling needs, and we can only manage one of them, how do you process that? How do you think about it? What goes through your head? And I'm just trying to figure out how your brain works, Vin.
Well, my brain works interestingly, but I think in this instance, and the big example is what we had to do this year. I mean, we had many choices. We had lots of people come to us. We had the park or fields department, as we're calling it. The schools are looking for adding staff, policemen. We want to add a policeman. All these compelling, and they're very compelling, reasons of why they need additional staff. We have to make a choice, and we have to say, okay, out of all these different things, can we cut something? Can we afford to? What do we do? I mean, the select board cut the capital money going into the capital, and my concern with taking that away is, as I mentioned, the DPW location. We're going to have to pay for that some way or another, so I don't think we should be cutting ourselves in that place at this point. But then we have the other choices. What do we weigh? What do we choose? So, I do weigh public opinion, but it can't be the sole thing. I mean, we're hearing a lot of people, and we had a lot of people come up this past month, 2 weeks ago, I think it was.
Feels like forever,
It
right?
has. It was from the Parks and Rec, people who were both on the board and other people who use the fields. And having seen the fields with my children, and that was many years ago, they haven't gotten any better, and they've only gotten worse. So, and I compare ourselves to other fields, even where I grew up, which is Foxborough, and the fields are, for the most part, great. And they have a very dedicated place, and we're not there. And so it's disappointing, and people were right when they scream, well, I'm paying a lot for taxes. Yes. So is that a priority? Well, we had to weigh that. What about all the different needs at the schools for health and mental acuity and concerns there, because the COVID's drawn a lot of people into crises, and I totally understand that. And the same thing with the police officer. They're going a lot more calls, mostly to do with mental health related things. So these were things we had to weigh, and my kind of thing that I went through, I apologize, is where do I hear, what's the greatest need, and where do I hear the push? And ultimately I said, okay, I think the fields, park and rec need to be focused on at this point. We can deal with the other things maybe in October, or maybe if we have to next year. I'm less concerned with the schools. They have a larger budget. I thoroughly agree they need to have mental health workers. A psychologist is exactly what they were looking for. But we can only have so much. The pie is only so big, so we had to divvy it up, and based on what we heard from the people who called and who had the loudest voices, plus my own feeling, I chose the Parks and Rec.
So the issue with the schools, one thing that people need to be aware of, the schools really just get a blank check. They get a bottom line of however much money we pass at town meeting. All of those line items are meaningless, so they can't really promise us that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. I suppose they can, with the credibility would be on the line.
The school committee would manage that and say, okay, this is, so we rest our authority goes to the school committee. So yes, you are correct. We as a town only vote that one line, and it's up to the school committee to manage that budget with the work of the superintendent. So you're putting a lot of, hey, this is the school committee.
A lot of faith.
You are.
A lot of faith there. Because that's so different from town government, where you can, in fact, drill all the way down to the paper products that are being used in an office.
Yes.
Whereas what's being presented for the schools is done just as it is a generous, because it takes a lot of time, and it is a good communication tool to let us know how money is divvied up and so forth, but they do have far more flexibility to move money around within their line items. We have none. We meaning, sorry, as an assessor.
Yeah.
That side of government has none. But the abiding thing is, we're all in this together no matter where the money goes. It's for everybody. It's always the whole town. And so I want to be very careful not to draw lines.
And one of the things that was an argument that I've heard was, and part of the reason why I voted in favor of having this park and recs or fields, was the people were not getting enough information from the schools about the fields, specifically the baseball fields in the back corner over here. We're to the point where I believe somebody is actually trying to raise money and redevelop themselves. And that to me says, well, that's wonderful, but I don't think it's really an individual or a group of people's responsibility when it's on town-owned land. It's really the responsibility of the town.
But we did that for Goodwill Park.
Yep, we did.
Project Possible, or Mission Possible, was all, volunteers who figured it out and then found people to help build it.
And the same thing with the rail trail. It was all done by volunteers. I totally
we've got a great history at doing that stuff. All right, I'm taking too much time. Anyway, so by the time you get the budget request from we've all handled the papers 1,000 times, and they've gone through our departments, they've gone through all of the staff and so forth, they've gone through the town administrator. How do you get through all of that stuff and really make sense of it? What are the processes in your head? And then are there criteria that the finance committee kind of relies on to say, yeah?
As you know, because you presented the budget, your assessors budget was basically just going through, and every single person's department's budget line by line, and they make a presentation. This year was a lot more streamlined and less ad nauseum of looking at all the individual lines, but asking questions. And I think the questions are twofold. One, why are you doing this, or is this the best way of doing things? More of to be insightful and ask suggestions of, hey, what about this? Or I don't think it's accusatory, maybe that's the best word, but confrontational thing. I think it's really kind of twofold because we don't know. We're not actually doing the stuff. We just want to ask questions of what's the best thing. How do we sift through it? It's just looking through. And then we look at the final numbers. And after hearing all the different things, we weigh it. I mean, we want people to come to us and, and so we can make an educated decision at the end of the day. So.
Takes a lot of time off camera, does it?
To do the stuff?
Yeah.
For me personally, no. I mean, it depends on how detailed the budget and some of the things. We have liaisons who hopefully will be they do a lot of work on the background, and so that helps. I mean, the whole different with the fields and trying to do that was a several meeting process that myself and Dan Alfred were involved with, and also Mark Whitaker. We were all based on liaisons and dealing with those, and a little bit of work there. Same with the schools. I'm on liaison for the schools, and those were in-depth meetings too. So but they're quasi on camera because they're meetings and things like that, but it's not during the regular finance committee meeting. But going through the other ones, if I'm not on the liaison, it's just, maybe looking at it the day before, or the police has taken a little bit of time because I wanted to really understand why they wanted 26, so I've added more in-depth looking at it. Or even following up some questions, like with the Board of Assessors, asking the assessor, well, what does this person do? So I can get a better understanding what's the needs. And
it's hard to jump in the middle and try to figure out all of the parts and pieces if they fit together in any department. So are there any changes that you would recommend to the way in which government operates? And I'm talking process and organization.
Well, one thing I've always advocated for is having an audit committee.
Interesting.
And partly because I'm a CPA, I have come from that background, but I think it would help the town by having an audit committee because basically the report goes to the select board, and the select board not necessarily have the background of auditors or accounting and things like that. And I think if you look at all the different corporations and you look at all the different, I look through nonprofit guides and things like that, and they suggest you have people who have an accounting background sit on an audit committee. So when the report's going to a group that don't necessarily have that background, what are we losing out there?
It's a very interesting question. I really think that's the first time I've ever heard that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, how about that? All right, so now you've come down to the point where you actually get 2 minutes to tell everybody why the voters should vote for you for Finance Committee.
Well, I would like to ask people for their votes because I've been on the committee for 2 terms, 6 years, and I'd like to put in another 3 years. I have the skill sets. Like I mentioned before, I'm a CPA. I have my CPA license. I've worked in nonprofits as a controller or vice president of finance, learning and knowing budgets, and that's the primary focus of the Finance Committee, is to look and review all the different financial matters, hence the name, and make recommendations to town meeting based on our insights, and so they don't have to. The town meeting doesn't actually have to go through the ad nauseum of looking at everybody's line item budget. So with that skill set, plus my love of the town and being a resident here since 1998, I think all of those things make me a person who I would like to ask everybody to vote for me.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Vin Murphy, for answering all these questions for me.
Thank you, Mary.
All righty. Thank you for watching Just Thinking. You've done your homework, so please remember to vote on May 24th. It's important for you, your family, and the community. Thank you.